What is the secret to unlocking your full potential? What makes your idols any different than you? How do you become the person you've always wanted to be in life? This is where you get all of your questions answered. My name is Justin Shank, and I sit down with some of the most epic individuals who are changing the world with their actions in business and in life. We discuss how they did it, why they pushed themselves, and more importantly, how they were able to focus on continuous growth to achieve their dreams. Welcome to the Growth Now movement. This week, I sit down with Hollis Carter. Hollis Carter is a serial entrepreneur and avid skier. He started his entrepreneurial journey in early 2000s, founding multiple companies, including a SaaS company he built into a 7-figure virtual business in less than a year. In 2013, he became a founding investor in Utah's Powder Mountain Ski Resort, where he now develops real estate and hosts events. His experiences and observations led him toward co-founding the Baby Bathwater Institute, a unique membership-based community comprised of some of the world's leading minds and entrepreneurs, with a focus on cultivating natural, mutually beneficial relationships. And that's exactly what we talk about in this episode. We discuss how he came up with this idea for Baby Bathwater, what does that even mean, and how he's been able to bring together some of the world's smartest individuals and most successful individuals to help each other level up. This is truly something that I am aspiring to do here in the future, and that's why I really love diving into this conversation with Hollis. Now, before we get to the episode, I want to let you guys know something really exciting. In February, I'm hosting a 2-day virtual event. It is truly going to be an experience that you've never seen before, with incredible speakers and people that you're able to connect with and build strong relationships with. The cool part is, it's completely free. All you have to do is go to growthnowsummit.com and grab your seat today. It is totally free. Head over there, grab one, and join us for this 2-day virtual experience. Once again, to reserve your free seat to the Growth Now Summit, a virtual experience, head over to growthnowsummit.com and just click that Reserve My Seat button, and we'll see you there. Now, without further ado, let's get to the episode with Hollis Carter. Hollis, welcome to the show, man.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude, I'm excited about the conversation. Like what you've built with Baby Bathwater, and I talked a little bit about it in the intro, but what you've built with Baby Bathwater is something that I admire because it's really about strong community. And bringing together people that need to be together, and you're the catalyst for that. But why don't we go into what is Baby Bathwater? I want to get into how you found that, or how you came up with that name, because it's ridiculous for what it is. I love it. But let's talk a little bit about who's Hollis today, what's Baby Bathwater, and then we'll break down how you got there.
Sure. Yeah, that's funny. That's the question everyone asks, and I'm always like, well, there's two answers. There's the polished PR one, and then there's the real one. And I mean, the polished PR answer is, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, I think in business and entrepreneurship and growth and all that, a lot of the good stuff gets cloaked in how you monetize things and like just doing bad business, and you miss some of the good stuff. So that just sort of worked out. But really what happened is me and my business partner, who we actually didn't have companies together, but were like conference buddies and like peer confidants. He's 50, I'm 35, but we started like having any real success about the exact same time. So our journey was similar. We went to conferences together and shared rooms and did things. We just use that terminology all the time. Like, how was it? I'm like, oh man, it was mostly bathwater. The baby was this lesson I learned or this person I met.
Nice.
And then we were at a bar one night. We had both sold our companies, and this guy was like, hey, I'll give you guys $30,000 to come to my house so we can consult on my digital marketing plan or whatever. And we're like, well, I got nothing to do. Do you want to do it? And we're like, we got to set up a company. And we kind of knew the guy, and we wanted to have him write a check to a funny name. So we set up Baby Bathwater Institute on legal Zoom at the bar on our phones and said, here's a company to write it to. And that was sort of the start of it. We didn't have the plan of starting a community or a group. It was like a weekend consulting gig that we were going to do as our first deal together.
Yeah.
And we've been going out to dinner so much together, brainstorming on what to do next, that we were like, we need a credit card to go out to eat on together, since all we're doing is brainstorming business ideas. So usually the reality is a little more direct and funny than the polished PR version of stuff.
Oh, I love it, man. And like you said, it all started at an event. And I think sometimes people miss the importance of of events and human connection. And like you said, there is a lot of bathwater at events, right? People selling from the stage and not actually teaching you. They're just roping you. And that's actually, so for my event, that's why I have a no sell policy, right? Like we're here to teach, we're here to learn, we're here to connect, more importantly. And you were able to kind of take that and morph that into this business, which started as a consulting thing and has morphed into this community. Let's talk a little bit about how that evolved over time and how you went from, this $35,000 business deal to these epic weekends that you create for incredible human beings.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of frame it, especially internally, our team and stuff, because I've seen so many books and courses and things. You're like, paint this moonshot vision and do it. Like, we kind of do the opposite. We make like goals that may seem hairy to someone who hasn't rented an island and done these crazy things, but every year we just do it a little bit bigger, but we try to keep it like, we're like, hey, we know we can do this and this is realistic, but it's a revisionist vision where we never get stuck on, we're going here, we're going to do this. We do our next thing and then we revisit, we review film a lot. So at every event, we actually, one of the processes we do is we interview the drivers, the waiters, the show divers, and make sure no one was a dick or like, no good to be around. And that's the first step in the process. And then we'll talk to the video dudes and all the people. So we actually start normally at the more service level and almost never usually get to like whoever the most important person there, because they always get treated right.
Sure.
The way that people are sucking up to them or whatever. But yeah, I mean, we just kind of like pivot as we see needs with the community. But I'd say the biggest thing we did differently to start is we didn't have a plan to start a mastermind and make a ton of money. We said, what is the thing that was the most, that we could associate the most to our success in the 2 or 3 businesses that we had started prior to being business partners? And it was 100% the conversations in lobbies at bad events where I paid a bunch of money and I went and like, it was just like pitch speaking and all this. And we just said, screw it. Let's start LobbyCon and we'll get a bunch. We do the same thing every time. It'd be like, 5:00 in the afternoon, set a bunch of chairs up in the lobby and be like, hey, we're going to buy drinks next hour. If you want to come hang and we talk. And so we're like, it's live event. So we made a list of, I think, 30 people who we really enjoyed meeting over time. And a lot of them were in Boulder for this event. It was kind of a bathwatery event anyway. And so we rented school buses and turned them into bars and went to the front of the hotel where everyone was at this other event and said, hey, we rented a bar up in the mountains for the night. We're doing a full dinner and everything. And that was like the first idea. It's funny. I saw NQ back there. He was there because he was at the event doing like, his thing. And we got done with it. And I was like, can we hang out again for another day? And it was just supposed to be one night. So then we rented like literally like a picnic table area at the lake in the town and set it up and people hung out. And then we got all this great feedback on how we hosted and curated and what we did. And so we just said, screw it, let's do more of that. And it was just me and Michael working like crazy at the beginning. And now we've got like a full team. And when I had invested in Powder Mountain Ski Resort, the whole summit thing and all that, I was like, sweet. Well, now I got this cool landscape to do bigger. We did tons of events there. Then we realized we wanted a more international crowd. Like our key has always been diversity. Like I was part of a lot of masterminds in the online space. It was always people teaching the same stuff and it's almost like we call it like the echo chamber or the circle jerk, like they're all talking about the same stuff. Yeah. And like, let's get guys who we have people who own ranches and hotels, but tons of people have e-commerce businesses and service businesses. And our through line has been the personality, that they don't think they're God's gift to earth just because they started a company and they know what they know, but they know what they don't know. So it's like an odd personality thing. I couldn't write up a mission statement and a bullet point list, but it's a gut feel generally. For sure. And it's usually through referrals, but actually being heterogeneous and being very mixed was huge. So we started going to weird conferences to meet people who didn't do it. And the theme was people who hated the overly structured part because they had reached a level where they kind of knew how to get the value they wanted through conversations and learning from other people's failures and just making connections versus being taught one person going through slides on a stage. Then we wanted to go international. And so we just said, hey, let's do that. So we went on a scouting mission and we found an island in Croatia and we rented it and lost a ton of money the first year learning a lot of stuff. But then made a ton on the second year. It got so many international people in the group we probably wouldn't have met. The goal was not rent an island, because it came out right during Firefest and all this. It was pretty funny. We made like a spoof video about it.
That's amazing.
But we pulled it off. But the goal wasn't make a bunch of money through an island event. It was add diversity of some more international crowd to the group. So why don't we do something over there? So like our reasons are often not exactly like transparent why we're doing stuff, but it's like some subtle little thing we're trying to accomplish.
No, I love that. And so as you were growing and building, I know you're like, well, we identified the first 30 people. Like these are the people that we'd want to do something like this for. I was listening to an interview that you did just to get some, what I do before, I've actually never shared this on the podcast. What I do before I interview somebody, I'll listen to snippets of other interviews they do. So I kind of have a direction, but I don't listen to the whole thing because I don't want to repeat an interview. But you had talked about you and your partner vetting 1,200 people each for your events. How did that grow? Was it just word of mouth? Are you doing marketing? That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's the work. I was just on with we're trying this like guy who's in the group doing some LinkedIn stuff, which I never have logged into my LinkedIn. So you had to like freshen it up. But that I remember that snippet. So when we did our first event in Croatia, it was the first time we ever did any marketing. So other than that event, all we've ever done has been word of mouth referrals. I'd say 98% of the people who joined the group, because someone who knew them went to an event and said, hey, meet these guys. Then we do a phone interview. We do a bunch of online research, and depending on our bandwidth at the time, we'll try to call some vendors and some customers and make sure they're like stand up good, just down to earth entrepreneurial people. That big interview process was the first time we let someone run Facebook ads, because our network internationally was pretty small. So we ran geo-fenced ones just for people in London and Croatia and other places that we wanted to attract for that event. And oh my God, it was like the hardest 3 months, because I had, each had like 10 phone calls booked every day. We've learned to make the application process harder. It really was worth it. The baby out of it was awesome, because I feel like we got such a PhD in like founder psychology and got better at the questions we asked to get the right people. But yeah, we each did about 1,200 interview calls because of those ads for the island event. But we only ended up inviting 250 people to the event, and most of those were referrals anyway. And so it was a big learning process. And so now we're going to get ready to do some ads for our Mexico event, just to try to get out of our referral network, but we're just being a little more poignant in the thing. But yeah, we interview a lot, and it's never about how much money they make, but it's really a gut feel of, are they going to be someone's going to be happy they sat next to at dinner? Because it's the worst when you spend a bunch of money, time, energy to get to one of these things, and then like every dinner, every seat, every party, everything you go to, like that time is on a whole nother value scale, because it is finite from start to finish. And so we want to make sure we don't just because someone's willing to pay for it, that we accept it. And that would be off and just kind of irresponsible too.
No, I love it. And so, when you talk about these events, it's, 250 people. And my first event that I did 2019 at 150 people. And the ultimate goal is for me to grow that to like 6,000 people. And as I battle internally with, how do I continue to make that feel like family? How do I make that feel intimate? Now, obviously you guys cap it, and you're always going to cap these types of events, but watching your promo videos for these events of 250 people, it seems smaller. Like it seems more community driven. How are you able to kind of curate that?
Yeah, very intentional. So, and I would say like the size ranges on the venue. Like I personally get like, I work more on the event production side. Mike works more on some of the kind of content side of what we're deciding we're going to teach about and panels we're going to have. Creatively, it's like my favorite thing in the world. And it's more like, what's the canvas to paint on? And you pick the amount of people that are going to be right to fill that up. At the island, under 250 would have felt sparse, because it takes up to 800 people.
Wow.
But that felt right. Our average event's probably more like 125. But oddly, in the last year, I've done tons of small things. Like I just took 30 people to the Kelly Slater Surf Ranch last week, and paid for testing for all of them so that we could hang out and hug and do the whole thing, and get to the safety standards there. But at the main events, which is kind of the main product that runs the business in the community, The key is like tons of very subtle structures. So, prior to the event, we have a 3-day meeting with everyone who's coming, faces printed out, intake forms printed out, spread all over the walls in the office, the whole team in there. And we start with like making sure we match make 2 or 3 people for everybody. And when they check in, they get a piece of paper with that person's face on it. It's like, hey, when it feels right, go tap this person, and vice versa. And that just gets us like integrated into knowing everybody and being refreshed. Most of the people are members who come. It's usually like 25% new folks and 75% members. So we usually have a pretty good idea of who they are and who they want to connect with. But that's like a really good way to get it started. And then we have our run a show that we work on for a long time. And that's normally multiple content scenarios going on at the same time. So, you go to a music festival and you have to look at that schedule and be like, oh man, there's 3 bands I like, I got to pick one. And there's some subtle entrepreneurial like lessons in getting the most quality stuff out of your time and doing that. But I would say, I think 25% of the guests are like in a place in their business or where they want lots of content. And we don't do single speakers. They're always panels. So you hopefully get some different points of view and can come to your own personal conclusion of where you're at.
Sure.
And they just go to tons of content and they really get into it. 25% go to none, and they spend all their time chatting or taking advantage of like the free wellness or adventure activities or just grabbing a bottle of wine and sitting and talking to people all day. And then 50% go to the content that's relevant and spend the rest of their time in more of a casual atmosphere or doing some of the activities and stuff. And then at night, we do a big dinner, everyone gets together, and we usually always have live music, and a bunch of the stuff isn't necessary for the event to be great. It's just stuff we like to do, and we know they're going to like it too. So we often blow a lot of the budgets on that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we have an app that helps a ton. So we've really spent a lot of money and energy on that. So we get the app ahead of time. It's like who they're going to connect with before and after. So there's no business cards like having to be exchanged. No one needs anything that way. Then kind of custom build a schedule of what they want to do for the day. And that just works really well to keep it clean, and no one's allowed to spend any money or sell anything. So it just like keeps them really in the environment. And we like to have little surprises and stuff just to keep the dopamine up and fun stuff happening. But you are right. A lot of it is built on how do we keep the rooms around 20 to 30 people, or adventures trips that are small with 10 or 15 versus it feeling like a room packed with a ton of folks. So you can get to know each other better.
No, I love that approach for sure. So why is this idea of building community something that you were so drawn to, right? Because you're really curating potential lifelong partnerships, friendships, and everything else in between. Was that the draw for you, or was it something completely different?
It's a good question. I don't know if at the start I was like, I like starting community. Me and Michael always joked that we do love connecting people. Like we get joy out of like, it's crazy in the group. There's multiple people getting married because they've met each other, and a bunch of business partners. We've invested in a bunch of people in the group, and all that's happened. But I think at the beginning it was more, I was a terrible student, like dyslexic, told that I was just, that it wasn't for me, and I kind of set up for failure for life in the way that the school system told me. And my dad's like, you got to figure out something else. And I learned the entrepreneur thing. But in the same thing, when I was trying to learn that field, courses, books, these focused, like very structured things never worked. But man, I could sit down with someone and have a conversation, and that one-on-one storytelling back and forth more in a jovial fashion just linked with me. And I would like get so many ideas and know what to do by talking to someone who told me their failure of what not to do or the success of what to do. So I think it was more rooted in how do I create those conversations that are organic and like pretty life-changing, but there's no way to be like, at 4:30, you're going to go learn how to hire. It was like, you may learn at 4:30 that you don't believe in this structure anymore because this guy said something that popped off. And creating more of those organic kind of things that definitely were milestones for me along the way. Now that it is working and we do have this like strong community, we love it. And it's definitely the driving force behind it of like, I would say we spend more time on community management than we do on anything that's revenue producing for the company. But our retention rate's like 97% year over year. So as long as we just keep the customers happy and the members of the community like enthralled, we can have our organic growth through referrals and word of mouth. my assistant Ferg, who's more than that really, but he's like, you spend so much of your time like, oh man, someone's having a business partner issue, or they're thinking about selling their company, or they're thinking about making a massive lifestyle change. Like, we're not an agency or a service business, but we'll get on the phone, and after doing this for 7 years, kind of know how to assimilate and like figure out what they're talking about. And like, you really need to talk to this person. I'm going to connect you. Or here's what I would do, because I've heard this from a bunch of other folks, and both of my parents were psychologists, so I don't mind listening and just be like, here's what I'm hearing. And that's sort of the lessons we've learned, that there's no course or book that could have taught that over the last few years of just the crazy ups and downs that everyone has.
And everybody does too. Like, no matter what the level of the person that, I really feel like the more success somebody gets, the problems just get bigger, right? Like it doesn't disappear. And I love the idea that it's not just events. You're talking about members. So dive into that a little bit. Like, how did you curate that idea as far as like, okay, well, it's just not a one-off thing, and then hopefully they come back 3 months later. You've created this member kind of area around it. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I guess it kind of came from two forces drove us into being membership. One is event business is a really poor business model. We do a bunch of work. We maybe make money. We maybe lose money. There's so many fixed and just like costs that just show up, and it was a wild ride. Okay, fill this one up and then do it again. And now put the deposit down. We were borrowing from Peter to pay Paul for the first 3 years and never really made any money. There's revenue coming in and people were happy, but it was a roller coaster financially to make it work. So like, I had a software company and he had a supplement company before we knew about subscriptions, and we're like, oh, this is how we fix it. Let's do a membership. That was, I guess, the logical business thing that drove it. But more, we didn't want to grow into some multi-thousand person conference. We wanted it to be intimate, and we're like, I want to grow old with these people. And as we all evolve, we can change the product to match how the world changes and we change as we go. So let's focus on, the membership side of it. And so we now have a very online component where people can stay connected, and there's an app and there's a whole system there that keeps people connected and that supplements the events to keep the community kind of working. But yeah, I guess there was the logical and then the emotional. And the emotional was like, I don't want to keep getting a bunch of new customers. I was always a big fan of like the 1,000 true fans kind of model. Like, actually every time I ride an airplane and I look at a city that I'm landing, I'm like, I need like the smallest little chunk of that to have a thriving business, and every connection I need to do something. Like, you don't need this. I've always been niche and small over some mass market thing that everybody's going to know about.
Sure.
And, I would say our business model for those folks, like thinking about masterminds or stuff like that, is not a smart one if you're just trying to make a bunch of cash. Like, it's a crazy ride, and I know there's a bunch of smarter ways to make money. But I lose motivation and gusto if I'm not really into the thing I'm doing. And this is like a constant thing I'm really into, and so is my partner. Neither of us really last more than 3 years on anything we did before. And now we're getting close to a decade, and I don't feel anywhere out.
That's awesome.
So, but we had to figure out different ways to scale something that doesn't make as logical of sense to do that, which is like now us starting to invest in people in the group, and hopefully over time those will pay off, and just stay focused on, what's best for the greater group as a total.
No, I love it, man. So we talked a little bit before I hit record, and you're like, it's actually a good story for the podcast. So I'll bring it up again. When you talk about when you started, you mentioned, InQ was at your first one and all these things. And so really, if you look at your network of people, you're talking high-end individuals, you're talking famous individuals, you're talking super successful in business. How did that begin for you? How did you begin to build those relationships in order for them to trust you to be like, yeah, man, I'm putting this thing together. You should come. Oh, by the way, it's X amount of dollars. Like, how were you able to kind of really begin to build those relationships?
Yeah, no, it's a funny part, because like they're just, I've never viewed any fame. I actually kind of like almost have sympathy, I think, for people at a certain success over folks who maybe are just getting out. The amount of weight you have to carry and how scrutinized you might be or whatever, it's different. And it's just never been a problem to connect, because I'm more like, how is it being in that position? That must be awful. Like having all that weight, and just spent a lot of time. I mean, I was a like a conference junkie as I started my business because I hated sitting in front of my computer, but I wanted to be productive and like get going on my path. And so I just went to so many conferences and I connected with so many people. And I'm definitely into the late night kind of crazy partying and philosophical rabbit holes, and would get into that with people and make real connections with folks. I like how you mentioned like, hey, well, here's the price and here's the thing. So the hardest thing for sure was calling all these people who get paid to go to events and saying, hey, I need you to pay 10, 20, whatever it is to come to an event. They're like, wait. I know, like, well, if you want to come to something with peers, then this is like how it's going to work. If you want me to set up a room for you to monetize and then I can pay you for it, but that's not attractive to me. And I don't think it's attractive to you. And so there was this big old curve for the first 2 years of everyone we called has their distraction default, which is like, I don't come to this unless I get paid X.
Sure.
I'm to learn how to circumnavigate that. And once there was enough people who they respected saying it was worth their time, that would kind of pan out. But it's funny you also mentioned the celebrity thing. Like, we have slowly worked ourselves into very competent, very successful, but really quirky, weird people in the group. And we've really been trying to move from people who are known to they have brands and they're the people behind the brand, or they have businesses, but moving away from face folks with like coaching and books and who are the thing. We have a small amount and we'd like to keep it. Now I kind of mentioned being heterogeneous and like having a thing. We try to keep the amount of people who are the face of their company as low as possible. And that's a very conscious effort. If we're looking at scheduling interviews and there's folks who are the face, we will generally deprioritize that right now. Because there's just a different level. There's also so many groups for that kind of business person and way less for just like the addicted serial entrepreneur who's just, and a lot of our people are not on the coast. They don't have a lot of network stuff to go to all the time. And, it's definitely a different individual that we slowly learned, is right for this group.
Yeah, no, and I love the fact that you pay attention to these things and then you make the shift, right? Like, people ask me all the time, like, where do you see yourself in 5-10 years? And yes, I have some vision, but if something else, shows itself and I go, okay, I have to shift. I have to go follow that model. That's what I do. And that's kind of why I've had the success that I have over the last 4.5 years of having this business. But now, as you see that, is that in a response to the people there saying that's what they want? Or are you just really paying attention and being like, this is what we need to do to continue to add more value?
I'd say it's both, right? Like, we don't make any decisions without, I think we like listen really closely. Like I said, it's always review film. Like, we always build in 2 days when the event's fresh or the whole team sits, and we've now built like a little internal board of advisors too, where we run ideas by from the group and they feel very much co-constructed about it. But it definitely started with essentially us having a knee-jerk reaction to the guru market. I came up when I was like 19. I answered an ad on Craigslist how to make a bunch of money online. And before that day, I was like selling events to these multi-speaker guru things. And like, I realized half the people had never done anything. They made money selling what to do that they had never done. And not all gurus are like that. But it was an aversion. And when we set out, rather than making my partner's a very direct kind of crazy person who would rather bust cults than join them and that kind of thing. So we made rather than making like a mission statement or a list of here's what we stand for, we made a list of all the stuff we stood against. And it became, pretty easy to realize there's a bunch of logic, and also the fact that there just wasn't a lot of group. There was so many groups for people with online businesses and who were the faces and all that, but way less for folks who are like behind the scenes, building their brand and doing their thing, and kind of not living in major cities and all that kind of stuff. So we just keep finding this market where like, man, it's the people who hate those conferences really still want to connect with people and have community. We need to provide that for them. And so it's a mix, I think, of listening to folks. Every now and then we'll have someone and it'll be clear that we messed up. Like at the beginning, I think we wouldn't invite back 30+% of the group based on feedback from the team and other people. Now it's down to maybe 1 or 2 people because we're getting better at understanding. And it's not that people are bad, but it's like you want those fits where time disappears because they're in these conversations. And like the amount of people who stay up till sunrise on accident at our events is wild because we only do full buyouts. And like our rule is no one has any rules there. Like we can do what we want. We usually have music going until the end of the night, but places for people who don't want to do the party thing. But they're like, I've never stayed up until 6 a.m, but I just looked down at my watch and I've been talking and doing this thing forever. And that looks like we did it right if that happens.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love that, man. And I love what you guys are all about. And the cool part about, my podcast or any podcast really is that you get to sit down with incredible people and have these types of conversations, right? And these people I deem to be successful, however you define success. And I wanted to ask you, what is your definition of success? And what are 3 things you do every single day to guarantee that success for yourself?
It's a really good question that I don't have a canned answer for, but I mean, honestly, this is a pretty interesting question because it changes over time. Mm-hmm. And not to loop it back to our thing, but that's why I like providing so many different ways of growing, whether it's your business or yourself, or it's like content or just connection or adventures or really strategic like conversations and stuff, is because the journey changes constantly. Me and Michael are looking at this business right now that we might buy and get into that makes no logical sense whatsoever, but we can't stop talking about it and we're super fired up, and it would feed into baby bathwater really well. But it's like dumb compared to what we've done before on a financial thing, but we can't fight the gut feeling of it. So I think for me, it's really feeling fired up, right? But I am very aware that in that journey, you can't use that as your only reason until you've created a certain amount of means, right? So you kind of have to go that Maslow's journey. And then you have the privilege of being like, oh, it's what lights me up and makes me excited. And really, I like the hospitality business a lot more than I know how to start and run supplement and publishing companies that have big margins and are easy to do, but I just don't get the drive from it. So I think success is like actually enjoying what you're doing to the point where you want to keep doing it is really important. But it also needs to work. Like I do believe that profitability and your team staying and your customers staying are these really cool, measurable things that you're not a delusional, crazy person and it's working. Like it's a nice feedback loop. And 3 things I do, I don't know how directly they're related to the business, but they're more just for my peace of mind. It's funny, I'm really into just my morning routine. Like I have my morning blocked off from 7 to 11 and I put my phone on do not disturb and I do my own thing. And it varies. I kind of have a grab bag of things, but the most consistent, this guy, Laird Hamilton, this big wave surfer, has this breathing app and I do that to start. And then I do some work. I run with my dog and do some workout stuff. And I sauna and cold bath pretty much every day. Just try to block it all out. And that's more just like personal self-care. On Sundays, I try not to talk to anybody and I completely get my alone time there.
How many days did you have to go without talking to anybody after you ran through all those 1,200 interviews? I would have had to take a month. I'm taking a month off.
I just love talking to people, honestly. But I know I have to build in this other side. Like I'm not completely, what is it like? I called like an ambivert. Like I like being outgoing and talking to people. I have to recharge on my own a lot. Like I've done the Vipassana retreats and it's like one of my favorite things, oddly, just being like silent for 12 days. But I hate doing is being on the computer. So now, I have someone on my team who I trust implicitly he's in my inbox, he's in all the things. And he just tries to keep me on the phone as much as possible because that's usually productive or at meetings. And then like catch that energy and do the follow-up with it. Because I really don't like sitting at the computer too much. I'd rather be engaged in like strategy back and forth or just uncovering fun things and taking people on adventures and fun stuff, It's an interesting ride, but like I think the world has so much coming in at them through the media channels that we have of to be successful, you need to do this, 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 and this. And then like, I get a lot of joy of fighting against that a little bit, of not being as militant structured, because when I get too structured, too clean, too whatever, I lose a lot of the creative fun spark. It's like I've gotten really into being healthy and doing that, but I have to like break that down and find a balance and like go have a bender with my friends for a few days. And that's usually when the highlight comes. Like there's a teeter-totter balance to it. It's never just one way. I think it's super important.
I love it. So I'm curious, obviously, as somebody who went to a ton of events, do you have an event that you attended that you're like, okay, they knocked this out of the park? Or this is one that I want to attend every single year? Or most of the time you're like, no, this is lame. There's a lot of bathwater and I'm not coming back. Yeah.
And once again, I don't think anyone is better, worse, good, bad, but there's a certain type of person who just hates the people who hated school. Like I hated school. I skipped more days than you're legally allowed to graduate and had to figure out how to get that fixed like every year. I just don't like the structure. I learned from like collaborative, organic like meetings. So everything always has a little too much structure for me. That being said, like so Dan Martell takes a group of people to Baldface on a ski trip every year. I organize some adventure stuff and collaborate with friends. Like the ones I go to, which is why we're finally morphing into something that once again is a bad financial idea, but good for the community, is these smaller, intimate trips where we learn something, we get pushed physically, and then we get to kind of blow it out at the end and spend some time. The only consistent trip I've gone to is not an official event. There's like 3 or 4 ski and surf style trips with some entrepreneurs that are not made to make money that we just put together and do that. And that's really up my alley. Is like also the perspective shift you get when you do something crazy. Like this last trip to the Kelly Slater surf wave is like a once in a lifetime kind of thing to get barreled for 700 yards. Like you're in a different space when you're hanging out talking that night. We were the bunch of people who are pretty high octane and running their business. They've got teams, they've got stuff, and just to be humbled and getting smashed by a wave or a big mountain, I think puts us in that nice space for the right conversations to happen.
I love it, man. I love it. This conversation has been absolutely phenomenal. I feel like I could go another hour easily and just pick your brain and just keep going deeper. But unfortunately, we're coming to the end. But before I get to my last question that I ask every single person, how do people get a hold of you? How do they get more information about Baby Bathwater? What's all the good stuff?
Yeah, so babybathwater.com is like our main site, and there's, contact us and apply button and stuff there. It's always like 6 months behind what we're actually doing because we're pretty live action behind the scenes and we barely update, but it's linked and there's a team there for it. For me, like Instagram is an easy way to get on there. It's kind of the only social one I really use, just mainly for all my adventure buddies around there. So it's an easy one. And yeah, I think that's probably the easiest way. And then my email is just Hollis at Baby Bathwater. Everyone shoot me an email.
Awesome. Sounds amazing. Now, like I said, I wrap up every single interview with this same question. Since the show is called The Growth Now Movement, the question is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Great question. And I feel like there's quite a few that are equal in proportions, but they're all generally massive, like bad decisions and coming out of them. One in particular, I had a business. I sold a lot of stuff that was very high ticket to people. And then my partner and me had a falling out, and I was the sales guy. He was the guy delivering the thing. And I had to go one by one to a whole bunch of people in the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars of sales and explain that it wasn't going to happen. I need to work out a deal with them on how to handle that. And,
wow.
It was a wild ride, and I ended up paying everybody back individually over time and worked out, deals, and a lot of them have become members, but it was a wild time. It's actually how I ended up with my first Vipassana. After every one of those conversations, I was exhausted. And like I ended up going to Burning Man and Vipassana back to back for my break before I dove into just handling that and just, downsizing I went from selling a software company, launching something new, messing up on a bad business deal, having to dig myself out. And it was just crazy to be kind of set in my early 20s and then screw it all up in the course of like 6 or 7 months and then have to come back from it. And, I do get super excited by committing to things I have no idea how I'm going to figure out. And I like doing that, but every now and then it bites you. Like my dad is always telling me, he's like, I'd love you to be motivated without a fire breathing dragon chasing you down. So I kind of like signing up and saying, screw it, we're going to figure it out. Right. And normally it works out great. And now I have a little more discernment and a great support system around me where the failure rate is lower. But generally the baby in the bathwater of these big failures is learning a whole bunch, about yourself and others and how you handle it. And so, yeah, that's one of many massive mess ups in the business or personal world that, like, it's how proud you are of yourself when you get out of it, that I think creates those like moments of knowing yourself that you can, it builds on itself and makes you like, better in some way. Because at the end of the day, the only person you can't really lie to yourself about how you've done is yourself. And
yeah. I love it, man. Hollis, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with my audience and myself, man. This conversation has been phenomenal. Hopefully we can have you on down the road again in your next shift or whatever this crazy business is that you guys are thinking about buying. We can talk about that. But I would love to have you back, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It was great.
Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.